So Lucy and I met about a minute ago, and she was referenced to me by recent guest on the show, Patrick Ledden. And what a fascinating story that we're going to dive into. But Lucy, I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we can make it work.
Yeah, so it's pretty fascinating. Your story is interesting. It's varied. It's diverse. There's a lot of different things we're going to talk about. But I think, for me, why I was really interested in talking to you, the specifics of what you do for sure, but also that you're pretty young. You're a young person who is doing some pretty incredible things at a young age. And I work with a lot of students. I speak in a lot of schools. I have an online school for students. So it's especially interesting to me because of that. So could you just give a little bit of an introduction, not necessarily too much as to what you do, et cetera, but just a little bit of an introduction into you as a person, your upbringing, family, community, environment that kind of put you on this path that you're on?
Yeah, so I right now I'm 17, but I've been on the path for a while. Me and my parents and my brother, we have four of us, our little family, and we've been outdoorsy people forever. I was born in Michigan, up in Lake Superior, in the middle of a snowstorm, which I find fitting. And yeah, ever since then, my parents have just taught me to enjoy nature, and we've been a traveling family forever because we have family spread across the U.S. and Mexico. So we drive down to Mexico, drive to Oregon. We drive everywhere. So that really gave me the opportunity to really fall in love with traveling and fall in love with just seeing the world and different places, different people. So that's kind of what also I love about mountain climbing is that it allows me to go to the coolest places and meet the most amazing people. So that's a big part of why I love that.
And
Yeah, but
you're in a car right now. Are you moving? Are you traveling somewhere? Are you in transit?
I actually not. I just okay, so up here in Michigan, we have this little one room cabin, and it's complete chaos 24/7 because all of my friends my parents are super chill people, so they're just like, oh yeah, everyone can come over. So there's constantly kids just everywhere in our cabin. So I was like, okay, well, I need a quiet place, and I was like, this is the only place that there's quiet. So I just came into the car. But yeah, I spend a lot of time in Charlotte. She's a good one.
Yeah, I did. So that's the name of your car, Charlotte?
Yep, it is.
Yeah, I didn't hear any background noise. I assumed you weren't moving, but I didn't think you were driving, first of all. But I thought maybe someone else was driving, but I didn't hear any background noise. So prior to progressing from there, I have a few questions about your upbringing. You mentioned that you were born in Michigan.
Yeah, that's actually where I am right now. It's this tiny little town of less than 100 people. There's like 50 residents year round, and there's a lot of people vacation here. So in the summer it grows, but yeah, it's this tiny town called Eagle Harbor on the very tip of the Upper Peninsula, and it's probably my favorite place on earth. I absolutely love it up here. I mean, since it's such a small town, there's just nature all around you, and there's so many things to do. The Lake Superior's right across from my house, right down a sand dune, and I have my best friends up here, and we have a blast. And up here is really where I was taught to love nature and really really find my passion for climbing and running.
And on your website, most of it is in Illinois. Like most of it talks about Illinois. Did you also, or do you also live or spend time in Illinois?
Yeah, so up here it's just like a vacation home. So we have a cabin that we come to for Christmas, for a good amount of the summer, and then just as many long weekends and everything as we can because we love it. But I lived in Louisville, Kentucky for until I was 12. So until I was in sixth grade, we spent a year in Mexico in between there when I was 5 and 6, just spending time with family and getting to know that culture. But but yeah, now I live in Naperville, Illinois, and I moved there when I was 12, and that's where I've been ever since, and I really love it there too.
This is so awesome. I really enjoy this conversation because it's so many, and I don't mean to sound like an old head here, but so many times you hear about kids and it's very difficult, and it's really cool to see you at a young age doing all of these things. How old is your brother?
Thing. He's 15, so about 2 years younger than me.
So you're close enough that you could be friends or you could be
Yeah,
enemies.
we're like,
I'm sure that fluctuates sometimes. But
yeah.
how? So you said you traveled in. I don't know if you said you moved a lot, but you said you traveled a lot. Did that take you out of regular schooling, or have you been in regular schooling? Plus, add on top of that all of the different trips that you make.
Yeah, so I am now, but when I went to a private school in first and second grade, and in Mexico I just went to a public school down there, in kindergarten, and then when I came after second grade, my mom actually started to homeschool me and my brother, and I was homeschooled until seventh grade, and that's really allowed us the flexibility to travel to a lot of the high points. So that's a big reason why I was able to be like the youngest girl to summit all 50 high points and to break that record because yeah, we didn't have the restrictions of school. Like we could travel and do school at the same time, which was super nice. But in seventh grade, in high school, my mom was like, "Well, we're definitely like sending them to regular high school just because it's so great, like socially, like being able to make all those friends and yeah, and educationally, like my mom was a great teacher when we were younger, but she knew when we were older she couldn't teach us like to the level we needed to be at. So I went in seventh grade to public school when we moved to Illinois, and that was ever since then I've been in the public school where I live in Naperville. Naperville North High School is where I go right now.
And you mentioned family in Mexico. Is one of your parents Mexican or of Mexican descent?
Yeah, my dad's a half Mexican, so almost all his family lives in Mexico, and that's like the biggest portion of my family, just because the Mexican family is huge, which I love, and we get down there as much as we can. But I absolutely love it down there. My parents are thinking of retiring in Mexico, and that year that we lived down there was one of the best years of my life. We lived in Querétaro, Mexico, which is like central Mexico, not too far from Mexico City. And oh my gosh, the city there, just the culture, the food, the people, everything I loved. So I would love for them to move back there and for me to visit all the time.
Yeah, and did you pick up? I used to be a Spanish teacher, so that's why I'm asking these questions. Did you pick up any Spanish when you were down there, and or did you retain any of it?
Yeah, I was 5 and 6 when I lived there for a year, and I was like almost fluent. By the time I left, I picked it up really well, and then I basically lost like almost all of it because we didn't really practice it, we didn't keep it up, which I regret. But then in seventh grade, started taking it in school, and I remembered it really quickly because it was in my mind. I just didn't. It just wasn't to the surface. So after going, I've taken Spanish up through last year. I took AP Spanish, so now I'm done. But yeah, now I feel like I'm almost fluent again. So it took a little while since my brain has developed more, but I love learning it, and I have a lot of motivation because I'm like, oh, I really want to be able to talk to my family down there and do all that. So
yeah, that's understandable. And I used to teach Spanish, and I have two kids who are 7 and 4. And when my daughter was born, I did it all the time with her. I spoke all the time with her, and she could understand basically everything I said. I'd speak a little bit slowly, and I'd motion and use context, but she was super good. And then I had my other son, and then I started building a business, and then my brain got very tired, and it's very hard and frustrating. So I've really slacked in that area as well, and it is something I regret, and I have on my to-do. Hopefully I do it sometime, but I do think it's important for them as well.
yeah,
So you alluded to,
for sure.
so in listeners, if you are picking up, there is a little bit of a delay. So if we talk over each other, that's why. But you alluded to the 50 high points. or the high points of the 48 and then eventually 50. Let's dive in because that was pretty
Mhm.
fascinating. Patrick Ledden, recent guest on the show, who listeners you may have listened to in recent weeks, he said, "Oh, there's this amazing girl, great family, unbelievable story. I think he actually said she'll probably be an Olympian someday." And I'm like, you know, who? Tell me more about this girl. And so he did. And I looked at your website, and it's pretty incredible. And so we'll dive into the mountain climbing, and then after that, we'll get into the running and triathlons. So just
Perfect.
the logistics, the time, the investment, the uh, not non-physical, but kind of the mental and emotional strengths as well as the physical strengths. Like there's so many directions we could go in. But why don't we just first start with what exactly you did and what records you set and how that started from day one.
Yeah, so I recently, in this past June, I became the youngest female to ever climb the 50 high points, which each state has the highest point in the state. So sometimes it's on a mountain in like Florida or Louisiana, but whatever the highest point is, you have to climb to that. And so I was the youngest female to do that. And then I was also, when I was 12, I became the youngest female to climb the lower 48 high points. So that is something I did before, and then I kind of added on the last two, and I finished that in June. So how it all started, I started when I was 7 years old. So it's 10 years later. Here I am, finally, I've done it all. But yeah, when I was 7 is when I started actually high pointing, and it didn't really start as like an obsessive like, oh, we're gonna do all 50 like right now, right here. I was more just like, we were in Lynch, Kentucky, which is where we lived in Louisville, Kentucky at that time when I was 7. And me and my family were in Lynch, Kentucky for a mission trip with our church. And my mom and dad were kind of the organizers of it. So we had some downtime, and my mom was like, "Oh, like what should we do with this free time?" And she was doing her research. She's a very good researcher, avid researcher, and she found that the high point of Kentucky was like 10 miles down the road. So, and it was just like a mountain, you just drive up it. It was really small. So she's like, "Oh, let's go to the high point of Kentucky." And we were all like, "Okay." So we went up, and like we were like, "Oh, this is cool." There's a little like stone marker that it was actually metal marker. It's like a little circular, and they have those at all the high points have that as the marker. And we found it, took pictures with it, and you're like, "Oh, this is really cool." And then that was kind of all we thought about right in that moment. But later, when we were like driving back, my mom was like, "Oh, let me research. There must be other high points. Like maybe every state has a high point." And then she found out about the High Pointers Club and how this is like a thing that people do. That a high pointing is like a goal for a lot of people, sometimes a life goal. So it's a very big thing, and well, for some people. It's not like a lot of people do it, but once you get in it, it's a big feat. So so yeah, so since I mentioned we travel a lot, so that my parents kind of used high pointing as a way to break up the travel. They're like, "Oh, we're going to Mexico. Let's go do like Georgia, Tennessee, like these high points on the way." And it was great for me and my brother because you get antsy in the car, all those like long hours. So just to get out, move your body, and to be in nature, get an appreciation for just the different geographies of the country. And climbing all those, it takes you to places you'd never normally go to, like in the middle of nowhere. Some of them are places you would never normally go. So that was really cool, just to see these like hidden little jewels in our country. So yeah, that's how it started. And then eventually we were like, "Oh, we've done like 40 high points." Like then we got kind of serious. We were like, let's try to do all 50.
That's it. It's so cool. It's similar to a family maybe, or a person who has a goal of going to all the national parks or going to all 50 states. You know, kind of a long-term play-out goal like that. And you answered the question I was going to ask if high point, like, or ask you to clarify, which you did, is that high pointing is a thing. It's a thing that people do. I have a friend in Nebraska who relatively recently, in the last several months, I've seen him posting where I believe it's he and his daughter are high pointing, and I believe their goal is to do all in all 50 states. So it is a thing, and it's
Oh,
a
that's
yeah, it's a really cool thing. It's such an investment of everything, not just like legit, like a hotel or food or researching the high point. Do you climb? Do you drive? Do you what equipment do you need? So it's a lot that goes into it. Off the top of your head, when you think back to all 50 of them, is there one or two or three that stick out as to either really fun, really easy, really beautiful, really stressful, maybe a calamity of the car broke down, etc.? When you think back to them, do any jump out at you?
mhm. Oh, for sure. So, well, Denali is just a whole another story in itself. That mountain is one of the hardest in the world, and that was just it would take me hours to like describe everything that went into that. But in the lower 48, there I but the favorite my favorite mountain I've ever climbed, at least in the lower 48, my favorite mountain I've ever climbed is Granite, which that one is in Montana, and um, and that is the reason I love it so much is because there's actual rock climbing at the top, which I found so fun. I love rock climbing, and there's not much rock climbing in the lower 48 states that has to be done, but that one there was at the top, which was really exciting to me. I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie, so I really like that that aspect of the mountain, and it was just so gorgeous up in the northern west. Like those forests are just so beautiful to me. So I really enjoyed that one a lot. And that trip we did a bunch. We did like Granite, Gannett, Kings Peak, which are all like pretty big mountains. That's like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho's tallest mountains. We did it all in one trip, back to back to back, and we were just like packing them in, and that was really hard. I remember that being super physically challenging, especially Gannett, which is Wyoming's high point. That is, in my memory, like definitely one of the hardest mountains I've ever done. Because I was young then, I was 12 years old when we did that. So it's really weird, like some mountains that people are like, oh, like you've done way harder mountains than that, but I did it when I was like 15, 16, 17, whereas I was doing these other mountains when I was 12, so I was so much like physically so different, so much more strenuous when I was 12. So that in my mind is one of the hardest mountains I've ever done, just because we did it in 3 days, and it was a push. It was a haul. It was going up a mountain. It was going up a ridge, going back down, and then going up the mountain, then going back down the ridge and going up again. So it was like climbing 3 mountains in one, which is just so mentally defeating. And that's a huge part of mountain climbing, is the mental side. It's almost more mental than physical, really, when you're climbing.
And you have to like, you mentioned some of these are kind of easy. I think you said the first one in Kentucky was kind of like, oh yeah, let's do that. And you do it, and then that's that. But there's an element, certainly of danger, of risk, of maybe weather, like equipment. So who? And I know I'm speaking collectively because we're talking about 50 high points in less than an hour conversation. So it's generalized speaking here. But can you talk about the duration, kind of like either an average, they would take a day, 3 days, whatever, just kind of find your average. And also the logistics and who went with you, because it's not just like you can go, or maybe some you could go. Can you talk a little bit about those areas?
Yeah, so most of the high points took just one day. That's like the majority of them. But then there are a few, Denali being the longest, that one takes anywhere from 12 to 30 days. It's a very wide range, just based on weather and a bunch of other factors. So it took us 19 days, which is like that's pretty good timing. Around like, I'd say like 2022 is average. So yeah, so that's the longest one. But then there are some that are multiple days, like Gannett and Granite, and some of the ones out west and Mount Rainier. So those ones take like, the longest in the lower 48 is 4 days, is the climb. So, and it varies a lot, because you can take your time and you can turn it into a week where you're you're not hiking very strenuously, but usually we were on a very tight schedule, especially when I was 12. I was actually like in school again, so we would have to like pack it into spring break or a little bit of summer break, something like that. So that was kind of the logistical side, a little tricky there. But me and my dad are climbing partners. So I've done every single high point, every single mountain I've climbed has been with him. So, which it's been an amazing experience. We've grown a lot together. He was usually when I say that, especially when I'm like, say I'm so young, everyone assumes like, oh, my dad is this big mountain climber, and then he got his daughter. He was like, oh, come along with me. But really, my dad had never climbed mountains before I had. We definitely like went into it both not knowing at all what we were doing, and then just grown along the way throughout these mountains together, which has been so fun. And it's really been an amazing experience just to kind of be seen as like an equal. Like when I go onto these teams, a lot of the time I'm seen as like the weaker one, because I'm young and I'm a woman and I'm tiny. I'm like 5'4", I'm 5'3.5", and like 100 pounds. So everyone's like, oh, like just assumes like I'm the weaker link. But it's really nice to just know that I have the same amount of experience as my dad, and we've been climbing for so long. We know each other's strengths, each other's weaknesses, and just really how to work well together. So that has been amazing. To do that together.
That brings like a few tears to my eyes, and almost a lot of tears to my eyes, because I have a daughter who's 7, and I just think how awesome that would be to have something with her when she's older.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really awesome that you guys are able to share that. Okay, moving on from the emotional part. So we had the logistics. Oh, what about your brother's not much younger than you. He's 15. You mentioned that you're kind of a group of 4, your mom, your dad, your brother, and you, and you seem like a very solid young person, and you have character and values, etc., and you're very driven, ambitious. I'm thinking of my own relationship with my siblings as well as my 2 kids' relationship. They're 3 years apart. They're young, but where did he fall in this journey of yours? Was he along for the ride? Was he totally disconnected? Was he like, what was that dynamic like?
Yeah, so when we were younger, when we were really young and first doing the high points, we would all do it as a family, all 4 of us. But kind of as the mountains got more challenging as we went along, he was more like, I'd rather just stay in the car. Like he just didn't really love it as much as I loved it. So my parents were like, okay, like, do what you want. So my mom would stay with him in the car, and sometimes she would leave him with like my grandparents or something. But usually we'd all go together on the trips, and then him and her would just be like kind of like our base camp. Like staying in the car, making us food for when we came down, which was super nice. Very enjoyable. But yeah, no, he's been so supportive. He's one of my best friends, and when we were little, of course, we'd fight like all siblings, but we just like the trips that we've taken together, spending so much time together, they really like connected us. I remember last year over COVID, we decided, we were like, okay, school's not happening. We can do school from anywhere because it's online. Let's just pack the car, be like totally self-sufficient. We had like a trailer in the back where we would sleep and everything, so we didn't have to stay in hotels. And we just went out west. And I remember like in the middle of the trip, he was just like, I feel like we've gotten so much closer. And I was like, oh my gosh, Jack. So yeah, no, he's been really supportive of high pointing, and that's not his first love. He's very fit. He would be really good at it, and he's very mentally tough, but he's just more into football. He loves the gym. He like lives at the gym basically, which has been good for me. He gets me there a good amount, but he is a gym fanatic. And yeah, so that's his love, is more like the team sports, the classic high school sports. But I'm definitely gonna drag him along to a few mountains, especially when my dad's like doesn't want to do it anymore when he's older, I'm going to be like, well, Jack, you're going to have to climb a few with me at least.
Yeah.
So he's getting more adventurous too, definitely.
And was that just the two of you that set out west during COVID, or was that the four of you? You and your brother, or your parents too?
That was the four of us.
Yeah.
The four of us. But that would be, we are really trying to plan some trips, just the two of us. We're looking forward to that.
Yeah, boy, it's like it's so cool. You know, I'm like I said, I'm 40, but your spirit and your adventure, I mean, it inspires me as much as it inspires anyone, both for myself personally, but also for my family. You know, I have a young family, and it would be similar to you and your brother. My daughter is a couple years older than my son, and so I have a thing beside me, USA National Parks pin board, and it's a relatively new
Yeah.
interest of mine, but we're taking our first trip here in a couple months. But I like hearing of the kind of the practicality or the reality of your family journey involved in all of this, because it's really cool. And you know, before really getting into more detail about climbing and or future aspirations climbing and then running and triathlons, so you for sure, you know, talking to you, seeing your website, seeing what you've done, and your brother, how you just described him, I would say your parents parented pretty well. So you know, you're coming from you're
Mhm.
17, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, your perspective is from 17-year-old daughter. But if you were to tell me or the listeners or anyone some of the things your parents did that worked or helped you become the person you are, what are some of those things that you would say?
Yeah, no, I they did an amazing job. And of course, like on the road trips there's bickering and fighting, but in the end it's an amazing experience and it brings us all closer. So, I'd say the main thing that they did is really just believed in me. They never say no. They when I am like, oh, I love high pointing, they've always supported me every step of the way, and they've sacrificed so much allow me to follow my dreams. They have driven me so many miles across the country to give me the chance to climb these high points. And yeah, I just say, like, having their trust, especially my mom. I know it used to be really hard for her when me and my dad would go up these mountains, especially when I was really young, and she'd be like, yeah, like trusting me to climb these kind of crazy mountains. But but throughout the process, she's definitely, like, her trust has grown, and I've, like, earned that. And it's really amazing, and like now to see that when I like go off to climb Denali, she's like, yeah, she has it. Like, I know she's been doing this for a long time, and she really trusts me, which is amazing to feel. And other than that, with like me and my brother, I mean, like I said, when we were younger, we would bicker. That's just a given. But they always taught us to just like put kindness first. And we were raised Christian too, so a lot of like those Christian values and everything, I feel like really show through in how we were raised, how we like interact with each other. And yeah, no, we my brother's the sweetest person. I have to give him a lot of credit for our relationship, because he definitely, like, I know younger brothers can be annoying sometimes for sure, but he's a sweetheart. So that's really helped. But yeah, main thing is just believing in your kids and giving them the opportunities, which is hard. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a lot. My parents definitely have, but I appreciate it so much.
Yeah, and I share that with the way I was raised and my parents. I wrestled, I grew up wrestling, and they would, you know, we're middle class, and they would drive everywhere and pay for hotels everywhere and make a commute out to Fargo, North Dakota. That was like our most notorious trip every summer to Fargo, which is 21 hours from where I live. So it's good to hear you talk about that, me realize how important that was to my upbringing, for then again me to pass on and raise my kids. Uh, I was thinking, kind of going back to the climbing aspect of it. You know, I on your website, I believe, or somewhere on the internet, where I read that, you know, you a next challenge of yours, I'm pretty sure this is accurate, is to climb the high points on all 7 continents. That's like a huge undertaking, and I have
Mhm.
a few climbing books, and I, you know, probably know more than the average person about climbing, but not much more. That obviously incurs danger and risk. But in terms of the high points that you've done, the climbs that you've done, have you ever hit a point where you were in danger, legitimate, serious danger?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely remember a few when I was younger, a few knife edges. There's one in New England. I think it was Maine's highest point, and I can't remember the name of it, but it had this knife edge that I was definitely nervous on. But I kind of start like repeating in my head when I get scared. I'm like, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And when I was little, I was actually afraid of heights, ironically, which, oh my gosh, I don't know how I chose climbing for some
Yeah.
reason still, but I really conquered that fear on Gannett Mount Gannett, because there was this knife edge at the top where it was on one side it was like a drop where I couldn't even see the bottom, and then the other side it was a very like steep slant to another drop off. And I just remember being so frightened, and I was just putting one foot in front of the other. We were on this glacier, and I had crampons on, which are like claws that go on your on the bottom of your boots to help you stay stable in the snow. And I had an ice axe and all this gear, and it was just me roped to my dad. So that's scary because I was 12, and if he falls, I probably can't catch him. Like his weight versus my weight was very uneven. So if I fall, that's good. He can catch me. But if he falls, I don't know what we would do. Hopefully, I would be able to catch him. But yeah, no, that's definitely built the trust over the years, being just roped the two of us. But I definitely conquered my fear on that mountain, because after making it to the top and making it down and off of that ridge, I was like, if I can do that, then I'm not afraid of heights anymore. Like I just realized in that moment I was like, I can trust myself with walking along these knife edges. Um, so on Denali there's a lot of dangers. On the lower mountain, it's crevasses, which are big just holes in the mountain, and they're often almost always covered by ice, like a glacier, because Denali, you're on a glacier the whole time. You fly into a glacier at 7,000 feet, and then you hike to 20,300 feet, all on glacier. So when we were going up, the bottom part of the mountain is the crevasse danger. So you're always roped up to a team just in case, because you could fall on it any time. And as you go up, you're always ready to be able to self-arrest and be able to pull your teammates out of crevasses if they fall in. And yeah, there's a lot of just hoping it doesn't happen, but you have to be prepared if it does. So that's definitely nerve-wracking down there. And then at the top of the mountain, there's more danger falling off the mountain than falling into it. So going up on the ridge, which is when you're going from 14,000 camp to 17,000 camp, that's like high base camp to high camp, and then the next day you can summit. So it's near the top of the mountain, like day like 16, 15 is when you're doing this. And that was nerve-wracking up there. I actually love, like now it's my favorite part is the ridge, just because I said earlier I'm an adrenaline junkie, and the views are amazing, and I love like testing the limits of my body, and the limits of my abilities. So being able to clip into protection, knowing when to do that, and yeah, I find it really, really fun, and really fulfilling once you do it. But it was definitely scary on the way back down, actually, when we were carrying a lot of weight. We were carrying like 50 pounds on our back, and going down the ridge it went from being fun to being more scary than fun. And I was definitely nervous walking along that ridge, just because there's about a 500-foot on drop on one side, and then like 1,000 foot on the other, and either way, you can't fall either way, basically.
How old were you when
So
you climbed
that's
Denali?
definitely very scary. I first went to Denali when I was 13, right after I finished the 48 high points, and we actually made it to high camp. But at high camp, we went with a guide service called AMS. So me and my dad went, and we had a group of 5 clients, including us, and 3 guides. But when we were up at high camp, which took us, I think we were up there at day 19, we were going to try to summit, and there was an accident up on the mountain, which wasn't in our group, but it was in a group that we had been climbing next to. And what ended up happening is our guides had to be called on a rescue mission in the middle of the night, to go help rescue this person that was stuck up on the mountain and in really bad condition. And unfortunately, he ended up dying before the guides got him back to camp. But that after that, our guides were exhausted, our weather window had closed, and we just had to go back down. So that was the end of that trip, which was disappointing and scary too, being that close to death. But you always know that that's a possibility when mountaineering, and it's a very real possibility. But seeing it is always a little nerve-wracking for sure. And yeah, so that was when we first went to Denali, and then our second trip was this past June. So that was when I was 17.
Wow, so many different lessons involved in that story, but being so close and then just having to pack up, head down, and wait 4 years to do it again. It's pretty intense. Um, who are your role models?
Yeah.
Who do you look up to? On both a local level, I'm sure your parents have a huge influence
Yeah.
in your life, but also like coming on a bigger level, whether it's triathletes, which we'll get into, whether it's climbers. Who do you look up to?
Yeah, I'd say definitely the main person is my mom. Um, my mom and my dad, honestly, because my mom she's the most selfless person I will ever meet, probably, in my life. She, not as only as she sacrificed so much for me, but she does for my family as well. And she's like the brains behind the operation. She does all the packing. I mean, I do a good amount of it now too, but especially when I was little, she would do all the packing, all the logistical planning. So yeah, I owe so much to her, and she just is a role model for what I want to be like, as just a human being. And my dad too, it's crazy. He doesn't really train for mountaineering very well. He's not too motivated to go to the gym or anything, but he's just so mentally strong that he just like can get his body to do insane things with barely any training. And I'm always amazed. I'm always really nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's trained for like a few weeks for this trip. He's gonna be the slowest one by far, and like hold back the group and everything. And I'm like, oh no, this is gonna be bad. And then he never does. He's always so strong. So he's definitely my role model in that way. But I'd say like on a larger scale, Gwen Jorgensen, which is a triathlete. She's won gold in triathlon last Olympics, and she's just been a big role model for me as a U.S. woman triathlete. She was really like the one that kind of broke open triathlon for women in the U.S. because we have always kind of been behind in that aspect, and she was just amazing. So she's really just showed me like the path, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love watching her race. It's beautiful. So I definitely find a lot of inspiration in her too.
And we'll use that as a segue to triathlons and running. But also, I want to note I appreciate and like your usage of the path. it's kind of like abstract, but it's also completely self-explanatory if you know what you're talking about. And from my background and what I do, and it's so cool to hear, a young person be aware of that and live it and follow it. It's pretty cool. So
Yeah, for sure.
in uh, in terms of triathletes, triathlons, running, training, and actually we were supposed to do this earlier in the week, and I think you said you were competing, so it got delayed a bit. But I feel like on your website and the information that I looked at, it was running. Like running, did running lead you to triathlons, or was it an all at once thing that you got into?
Yeah, I have been running since I on a team since I was in first grade, and even before that, I actually where I am right now is like the very end of the first race I ever did, which is 5K when I was 3 years old. And like I said, my parents have always been very supportive of whatever I set my mind to. So when I was 3, I was like, I'd always seen my dad run the Popeye. He was a runner in college, and I'd always seen him do it, and I was like, oh, I want to do it, because I always like wanted to be like him. So, so they're like, okay. So I went out there, and by the entire last mile, I was just crying. But I was like, I'm still gonna finish. So everyone in the town was like, oh my gosh, they're abusing their child. But like, I was like, they're like, well, she wanted to do it. Like, it was her decision. So, so no, that was my first race, and then after that, my grandpa would always like challenge me to races up this mountain that we have here. There's like this mountain that we always climb to pick berries at the top, and he'd challenge me to like who would be the first up it. So really my competitive side like came out with that, and soon my parents were like, well, you should try running when you go into school and when it's an option. So first grade I started running with my cross country team, and I've run ever since. I just kind of became a running addict almost, and it really, yeah, it's been a huge part of who I am. That's taught me so much about myself and so much about just the people around me and how to live life, because I feel like the way that I push myself in running is how I push myself in mountaineering and in school and just in every aspect of life. I feel like that drive that I learned from running has transferred so well. That's why I love like when kids like have a sport when they're young. It teaches you so many life lessons. So running's been that teacher for me, and I've just loved it. I couldn't imagine my life without running. So that's what started. I started as a runner, and then when my parents had always like encouraged me, like, okay, try every sport, like just make sure you like find the one you love. So I did like all the sport camps, and I did swimming for like 1 or 2 years when I was younger, and then there was like local triathlons that I did, and I actually did really well in it, and I was like, oh, like this is fun. I like kind of combining the running and swimming, and I loved mountain biking up here. Our cabin has amazing mountain biking really close. So I had done all 3 sports before, not like training really for running, or I've trained for running, but not really training for biking, and a little bit for swimming. But there was a triathlon team in Louisville, Kentucky. So I joined them, and I did some races. There's a youth and junior circuit, which is really like this segue if you want to actually like go to college for triathlon and like go into the Olympic pathway. That's the race circuit you do, is the youth and junior USATF racing circuit. So I did a few of those races when I was younger, but then I wasn't really serious. I was more of a runner. And then my triathlon team disbanded. So I was like, oh no. I was like, is it going to end there? But I really loved the sport. So my parents looked around for more teams. And actually we were thinking we were going to move anyway. We were thinking about moving to a different location, but we hadn't decided what location. So they're like, oh, like where's a good triathlon team, a good youth triathlon team? And that's one of the main factors that led us to Chicago, to Naperville, which, yeah, like I said, they've sacrificed so much for me. They've always put me and my brother, our ambitions first. So we moved to Naperville, and there's one of the best triathlon teams in the nation here. So I really dove into triathlon, and that was pretty much my sport for a good amount of years until I started high school, which the high school running team that I'm on is also one of the best in the nation. The coach is amazing there, Mr. Iverson, and I absolutely love the team. So in high school, I was like, oh, well, like, I love running too. So I really had to decide, like, sophomore year, well, am I going to run in college, or am I going to do triathlon? Because even though triathlon has running in it, it's really hard to do both. It's like, if you want to run in college, you really have to focus on just running. So I chose running just because there's not as many schools have triathlon offered. So I just figured that would open more doors for me, and I loved both sports. So I decided to run more. So now I kind of do triathlon. I love my teammates so much. So I go to practices, especially in the summer when I have time, just to see them and to spend time with them. And it's amazing cross training for running. So I did 2 races earlier in spring, and then I did one this past weekend. And it was really just for fun, just to spend time with my teammates. But I love triathlon so much. So I had so much fun racing it.
And I have 2 brothers and a sister. My oldest brother did an Ironman probably 5 or 6 years ago, and then my middle brother just recently did a half, and then he's running a full next month in Maryland. So I've been along for the ride with that, and it's cool to see. And I can definitely see what you're saying, where you specializing in running or specializing in triathlon is different, because it's a specification versus more of a rounded, those three events. So it makes sense hearing what you're saying about deciding, hey, which path am I going to want to take? Do you have long-term goals with, you mentioned college and then post-college? Like, do you have is it, I'm nearly certain Patrick said, whether it was just off the cuff or like, hey, this girl's probably going to be Olympics someday. Do you have like a goal beyond college where you think, I'd like to run competitively just for leisure? I'd like to do triathlons, try to make the Olympics. And then after that, where does mountaineering come into this?
Yeah, honestly, I haven't decided yet. I really like to take it kind of one step at a time, and especially like 1 year at a time. So right now I'm just focused on college, and I know I want to run in college. So I've been talking to coaches, I've been reaching out, and I also am very focused on academics as well in college. So I want to go to a really good academic school. I want to run. So that's what's guiding me in my college search. Because academics is very important to me, because I'm really passionate about the world water crisis, which is a long story, but I got into it because of like climbing, because of the connections I made there, and that's been a huge part of what has driven me to climb more mountains. And that's why I'm going to major in public policy in college and minor in entrepreneurship business, to really just give me the tools I need to become an influencer in the world water crisis. That's really what I want to do after college. But I definitely want to pursue some athletics after college in some sense. So I'm going to see how my running goes in college. And I'm a distance runner, so I've never had the chance to run really long distances in races. But I think I would excel in the half, in the marathon. So if I have the opportunity, if running goes well in college, I will try a few marathons. And if it goes well, then I would love to try to make it to the Olympic pathway. That would be amazing. And I've also thought about doing triathlons too. After a lot of triathletes, a lot of Olympians go running, take a running path in college, and then after college transition back to being a triathlete. So I've definitely thought about that as well. well, and I'm not much. That's we'll just see how running goes in college and see where my life is at afterwards. And I know I'm definitely gonna run and do triathlon for the rest of my life. But I would love if it brought me to the Olympics someday.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, how cool would it be? And I don't know, you're 17, let's say, probably 7 years from now, the next couple Olympics, to see you there and to play this interview. I think that would be awesome. I had a few years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I had a guy on my show named Spencer Lee, and Spencer's he will go down as one of the best wrestlers ever, especially from the state of Pennsylvania, but also in the nation. He's a 3-time national champ so far. If he pursues it, there's a high likelihood that he'll win an Olympic gold. Just a really unbelievable wrestler. And I talked to him, I want to say it was probably your age. He was probably 17 or 18 after he had won 3 state titles. In the last second of his senior year, lost for the 4th state title. So it was like crazy. And to hear just the composure that he had at that point, it's very similar to where you're at. So I'm always so not curious, not anxious to say it, but like just to see where you go and what you do, because you have such a sound, head on your shoulders that it'll be exciting to see what path that takes. And you mentioned running and distance. What is distance running in college? Like, what events would that be?
Yeah, so in college, in cross country, everyone runs a 6K, which is we run the 5K in high school, so it's not too different, but a little bit longer. And then in track, there's the opportunity to run the 5K and the 10K on the track, which the longest we have in high school is the 2 mile. And occasionally you can find a 3 mile, but it's very hard to find. I've only done one, but I loved it. So running the 5K and the 10K is what I would do in college. So I'm super excited for that. But yeah, and then also mountain climbing after college. I'm gonna mountain climb my entire life as well. So I'm super excited for that. Hopefully I'll have a bit more time after college, a little less strict of a schedule, but we'll see.
So do you find it hard to be kind of a regular 17-year-old girl? Like, is it tough at all for you to relax and have fun? And, you live such an ambitious, driven, hardworking life that is it hard for you to just kind of be with your friends and eat pizza and hang out and do nothing? Is that difficult for you at all?
At times, I've really been lucky with the people I've met along the way of my life. I have some amazing friends, and a lot of them came from the sports I do, such as running and triathlon. So that's really nice. Just being around like-minded people who we talk as we bike and we talk as we run and spend time together that way is amazing. And I think having friends that share the same passion and drive as you is very important. But yeah, no, especially mountain climbing. There's not a lot of young people that do mountain climbing. Most of the teams I'm on, if I'm like mountain climbing with a team, everyone is at least 20 years older than me. It's usually people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. So yeah, it's challenging at times to really fit in, but I would love to get more of my friends into mountain climbing, and there's a lot of interest for sure. At least in the people I've talked to, they love the outdoors, love pushing their bodies, they're very in shape people. So I think that would come easily to them, and I think that a lot of young people have like the want to get out in nature, to enjoy it, to climb. It's just the matter of like doing it, of actually getting out there and going for it, it's easier said than done because there's a lot of logistics that goes into climbing. It's challenging. That's the main part, I think, that holds people back. But it's so worth it. Planning it is so worth it. So that's the main thing. But it is, when I'm like off at Denali, when I was off at Denali for a month, I mean, I was separated from my friends for a long time, and I couldn't really communicate with them because on the mountain communication is so hard. So I start missing people and everything, and I know they're having a good time down here when I'm up in the 20,000 feet. But I'm still doing what I love. I love it up there, and I know when I come back they'll be waiting for me. So I enjoy it a lot, and I've only found support from my friends in doing it. So I've had a
Yeah.
great time with that.
It's cool. It's cool to talk to you because you're, I've some of the things you're talking about. I've lived like the hard work and the mindset and the resilience and getting back up and shooting for big goals. But at the same time, I'm learning from you and or being reminded from you that like that was such a good answer to the question that you surround yourself with the people who support your goals and or partake in the things that you do and or want to do. So it's like it all works together, from your family to your activities to your habits to your friends. Like it all works together to produce, the life of Lucy and the things that you're interested in doing. And I want to point out something that I meant to say and I forgot to say when you were talking about, your goals with now college, post college, etc. uh, my wife and I and our kids have been watching the Olympics a lot, and all the sports really, and you see these profile pieces of the athletes, and they talk about their lives, and they talk about when they got started. The April and Alex, the beach volleyball. Alex was talking, and she said when she was a kid, she went to her brother's volleyball camp, and she was too young for it, but then they said, well, she's tall. Why doesn't she stay too? And the parents said, okay, we'll be back next week. Why don't you stay too? And like that was her birth to becoming an Olympian, and they're in the finals, I believe now. So it's cool to see like, you where you're at, and for people to understand that regardless of what you do in the future, where you're at right now, the things you have done, like there's a reason for it. It didn't just happen. It's a lot of things that work together that helped you do the things you've done, set 2 world records, have a ton of more ambition to do these different things, and be a well-rounded human being. I think it's like it's awesome. It's so cool to see.
Thank you. Yeah, it's hard to balance everything sometimes, but it's well worth it. You just gotta do what you love and prioritize that.
Are you real regimented, like in your day to day? In the older folks world, like myself, people that I watch, listen to, pay attention to, there's this like strict schedule, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Are you pretty regimented, or are you a little bit more free in terms of your schedule and your day to day?
Yeah, it really depends on the time of year. So in the school year, yeah, I pretty much have like a set schedule where practice is I go to school, wake up, go to school, and then and I have practice right after school. And we have morning practice once a week, and then I go to the gym and lift by myself a few times, like 4 times a week. And between that, school homework, and that, my week is very busy. And then the weekends, I get to spend some time with my friends, so that's a little less schedule oriented. But yeah, for sure during the school year, it's my life is pretty planned out, which it gets hard sometimes, but just like having the weekend to look forward to something. And I really love what I'm doing. Like my teammates, I love my teammates, my running teammates, and I love the sport, so I enjoy it a lot. But in the summer, I don't really stick to a schedule very well. So especially up here in Michigan, when I'm in Naperville, I have like a pretty set schedule with morning practices, and then I sometimes have triathlon if I want to go. I kind of get to choose when I love all of that, but I can really, it's pretty flexible in the summer. But up here in Michigan, everything kind of just goes crazy because it's like we're on vacation and all my friends are up, and I run when I can, but it's hard to get it in sometimes. But
Yeah.
it's yeah, the schedule kind of goes crazy up here.
we'll start to wrap it up here, but I want to come back to, is it called WaterStep? WaterStep or Watershed, the organization you work with?
Yeah. Yeah, WaterStep.
And have you ever read the book or heard of the book Thirst?
No, I haven't.
You should look into it. And his name's Scott Harrison, would be I'm thinking a great contact for you to contact. He's on a similar mission. Um, he started an organization with the same initiative and cause to bring clean water to underdeveloped countries around the world. And it's an awesome book. I feel like you would really enjoy the book, and you'd probably learn from it. You know, as that was his mission, and he has built a successful nonprofit and a very successful guy, Scott Harrison. The book is Thirst. Great book and great read. But can you just, I wish I had the statistics in front of me, and I will read them during the intro or the outro of this episode. But the lack of clean water, the amount of illnesses it causes, the amount of deaths it causes around the world, and how, I mean, I've been drinking water during this, interview, and it's just something that a lot of us don't even think about. We just take for granted. Yep, have water, drink. And that's that. And it's not the reality for so many people around the world. So can you just, as a close to what we've been talking about, I think, again, that's another tremendous thing that you're using what you do for a reason, for a cause, and that cause is to help bring clean water to people around the world. So, if you could just brief how you got into that and how we can help with it.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I'm definitely putting that book in my notes on my to read list. But how I got into like this passion of mine is when I was 2 years old. So it was mostly my parents because I was 2. But we sent a Samaritan's shoe box, which is you fill it with gifts and you send it around through Samaritan's Purse. You fill it with it's during Christmas time, so it's like gifts for kids that otherwise wouldn't get gifts, and they send it to a different country every year. So the year I did it, they sent it to Uganda. And I wrote a little note that was like, "Oh, please write me back if you get this." And a girl and her family in Uganda got the note and got the shoebox, and she wrote me back. And after that, we just became pen pals for forever, for like 10 years. So we still communicate to this day. And I as I grew older, we would like exchange information about what we were doing, where we lived, everything. And she told me that like her village didn't have clean water, and that was a big problem in their community. And she kind of just give me stories about that. So I had never known that was a problem, because as you said, I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and Naperville, Illinois. I live in the U.S., so water is a given here. But I learned for her it wasn't, and that really shocked me at first, for sure, and still continues to shock me at times to this day. I forget sometimes that's such a big issue for so many people. But so I kind of told my mom, I was like, I would talk to my parents about our letters, and I said, yeah, her village doesn't have water, clean water, safe drinking water. So we started to kind of try to connect with our church. Our church is involved with this organization called WaterStep that was in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's where we lived at the time. So they were like a small organization, so we could work personally with them and get a water filter. And what really like prompted our trip over there too was that I wanted to climb Denali, but I needed to prove that I could climb a mountain that was high in elevation for the guide service to let me even go on the mountain, because this is when I was 12, so I was even younger back then, and there wasn't protocol for them to let a 12-year-old on the mountain. So I went to Kilimanjaro, which is in Tanzania, close to Uganda, but in Tanzania, Africa, and and I climbed that mountain with my dad. And we also, my whole family went over and we brought our water filter to Faith, who is my pen pal. That's her name. We brought it to Faith's village, and bringing it there was just so eye-opening. I had never been in been in Africa before, or been in really in a country so stricken with the water crisis, so stricken by the water crisis. And you could just see there's like plastic water bottles everywhere, because they don't really, like, people have monopolies on plastic water bottles, which are really expensive to buy, and a lot of people, especially like rural villages, don't have access to that at all. So we went, like, putting the filter in was amazing. Just seeing how much it like changed the dynamic of the village, because their culture is beautiful, and the people there are so friendly and so amazing. But like so much of their day, especially the women, is spent just getting water. So I mean, they would be so much more productive, so much able to enjoy other things if they didn't have to spend all that time getting unclean water too, that made them sick half of the time. So yeah, so that kind of sparked my passion in that, and ever since then I've been trying to dedicate climbs, and donate, just raise awareness for WaterStep and any other organizations that focus on the world water crisis, because yeah, I've seen firsthand what an enormous problem it is, and what fixing it can do to a village. So that's my story with it.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I'm really grateful to Patrick for having introduced us, and to you for making this work amidst your training and travel and friends and everything. It's been really awesome. And like I said earlier, you're an inspiration to me. You're an inspiration to a lot of people, and I think it's awesome what you're doing. And I'm just extremely thankful that you talked to me for an hour and shared your story and everything you're doing, and it makes me want to get out there and start doing more of what you're talking about, being outside, climbing. My kids have this game that we say, like, run, jump, do whatever you want. I get that. That's a game that we play, and it makes me just want to get outside and do it more with them. So, as we go, share please your social media, your website, the WaterStep information, whatever you'd like, so we can help support what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, their website's waterstep.org. So if you go there, they have all the information on that site. It's really helpful, so you can learn about all the projects that they're into right now, which is changing the world. I'm a big fan of WaterStep, and there's some amazing people. So, and I'm glad I'm inspired. That's what I really want to do through my climbing and through my stories, inspire other people to enjoy nature too, and to test their body, and just use it however they want, to go closer to their family, to be more in shape, to be more happy in nature. I mean, there's nothing that it can't do for you. So I'm glad I got to share my story, and I hope you get outside. I hope that it helps a lot.
Yeah, it will. I really appreciate it, Lucy, and have a great rest of the summer. And I hope we can talk again in the future. I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to talk anytime. Thank you so much for having me.